What up, everybody? InstructaBeats back again here with our statistics unit. Today we're going to be talking about finding the interquartile range, or IQR. Makes you sound very smart when you say those. So let's look at the data and check out our objective. Our objective today I will be able to find the interquartile range by identifying the first and third quartiles using a visual model. So before we get into all that awesome sounding math and making you sound really smart, we need to add to your math vocabulary. Now, we've already talked about statistical measures, right? There are ways to help generalize a set of data, make conclusions about it, and compare it to other sets of data. We talked a lot about measures of central tendency, trying to find that center of our data. But to look at data and to answer a statistical question and make good inferences, you can't just look at the center of the data. You have to look at all of the data, and that's where our measures of variability come in. So measures of variability are describing a set of data by looking at the extent of the variability. I'm using the word in the definition. You could say the spread or the dispersion. Basically, you're looking at the entire set of data and all the differences in them, as well as the center of it, which we've already talked about. Now, we've already talked about one measure of variability. We have talked about the range, right? And the range is the spread of the data. Remember, finding the from the minimum to the maximum, so you're subtracting those to really find out, okay, what's the spread? How spread out is my data? Now, we have different ways to look at data, which we call statistical measures, and we have talked a lot about measures of central tendency, our mean, our median, our mode, trying to find the center of our data. We've talked about our range in a previous lesson, and we're going to introduce a new measure of variability today, which is the interquartile range. So the interquartile range is the spread of the middle 50%, and it's found by subtracting the first quartile, which we're going to talk about in a second, by the third quartile. So let's just make sure that's in our notes, and that way we can go back and review them. It will all make sense at the end, I promise. So we want to start with the conceptual problem. So it says, here's the data collected for the question, how much cash 9 people had in their wallet when they were asked. So we stopped 9 random people on the sidewalk and we said, hey, how much cash do you have? One person said 5, one person said 8, one person had 22, right? 4, 10, 15. You can see the data right there. So we've talked a lot about how to find, okay, well, what's kind of the average? What's that center part? What do most people have? What would a typical person have? That's what we use the measures of central tendency for. And we've also found the range, right? So our minimum would be 2, our maximum would be 22. So we could say the range of this data, the spread of it is $20, right? That's kind of the spread between the person who had the least and the person who had the most. Well, we want to now take this to the next step. So just like we were measuring central tendency, we want to order these numbers from least to greatest. So now that I have them in order from least to greatest, we can start talking about quartiles. So if you look at the word quartile, oops, try to write it better, you should recognize the prefix, right? Quart, right? And we see that in quarts. If you're in a country that uses customary measurements, we see it in quarters, right? And quarters are fourths. So when we're talking about quartiles, we're talking about splitting our data into fourths. Now again, the percents that go with our data, 1/4 would be 25%, 2/4 would be 50%, right? So that's going to be the middle, that's half. 3/4 would be 75%, and 4/4 would be 100%. So just to kind of help us visualize this, I'm going to put this kind of into an area model. I'm going to do my best. It's not going to work out perfect because I didn't space them out perfectly. And the first thing we want to do is we want to find the median, right? So if we cross these out, the median should be the number that's directly in the middle. So if I cross out 2, okay, so 2, 22, 4, 15, 4, 10, 5, and 8, I'm left with 6. 6 is going to be my median, okay? So that's like splitting my area model directly in half. Now, we call this a median, but we can also call the second quartile, or Q2, because it's 2/4 of the data, right? It's directly in the middle. It's 50% of the data. Now, my area model didn't quite work out perfectly. Let me move it over because I kind of spread my numbers out, but I want you to visualize it, so there you go. So now when we're talking about finding that first quartile, or the first fourth, we want to split our half into another half. So if we were going to find the median between that, right? So the median of that first quartile, we'd cross out 2, 5 would be left with 2 4s. So our average would be right here in the middle of those 2 4s, and it would be 4, obviously, right? So this is going to be our first quartile. We're going to call that Q1. Okay, that's how you label first quartile. We're going to do the same thing with the numbers to the right of our median. So we're going to cross out 8, 22, and then we're going to have 10 and 15 left. When you divide that, when you find the average of both of those, your third quartile is going to be 12.5, and that's going to be your third quartile. So when you're finding quartiles, what you're doing is you're splitting it into fourths, right? So this would be your first 25%. This would be your second 25%, your third 25% of the people you collected data from, and the fourth 25%. So sometimes these quartile things sound really crazy, but it's actually pretty easy. You're basically just splitting your numbers in half by finding the median, and then splitting the numbers to the left of the median into half to find your first quartile, or 1/4, right? Then you're splitting the numbers to the right in half to find that third quartile, and then your fourth quartile will be down there, but we don't really worry about that. So if we want to find the quartile range, right, what we're doing is we want to find out from 25% to 75%, what's the range in those numbers. So my third quartile was 12.5. My first quartile was 4. When you subtract those, you could say that your interquartile range, or IQR, is 8.5. And that's all you're doing, right? And now you can sound really smart because you're like, hey, the interquartile range is 8 5/10. And you sound really intelligent. But it's really quite easy. You're just trying to split your numbers into fourths. So now we've kind of shown you an example. Let's name our steps that I just did, because that could be kind of confusing. Let's make it really easy and something that we can repeatedly do when we're trying to find the interquartile range. Step number 1, order the data from least to greatest. Step number 2, find the first quartile. Step number 3, find the third quartile. And step number 4, you find the differences of those numbers, right? So third quartile minus the first quartile, and that's going to give you the interquartile range. Let's take a look at a we do problem. So it says this data collected shows how many stuffed animals your classmates have. So all the way back to the stuffed animal question. What is the interquartile range? So we know the minimum is 0 and the maximum is 8. So we know the range is 8, but that's not what we're talking about. That's the range of the whole data. We only want the range of the middle 50%, from 25% to 75%, from the first quartile to the third quartile. So the first thing I want to do is I want to order them from least to greatest. So I have 0, 1, I have 3 2s right here, I have a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, and then I have an 8. And you don't have to draw this area model. I'm just trying to kind of visually show it to you as we do it together. You don't need to draw that, but it's just something that helps me kind of figure it out. So the first thing I want to do is I want to find my first quartile. Well, to do that, I need to find the median first. So if I'm crossing these numbers out, I cross out 0, 8, 1, 7, 2, 6, 2, 5, and then I have 2 and 4 left. I know my median is going to be an average of these two numbers, so my median is going to be 3. That's my second quartile, all right? Now once I have that, now I can find my first quartile. Now here's the thing though. When you find your quartiles, the two numbers you use were part of that second quartile. So you're not going to cross these numbers out. You're going to start by crossing out the 0 and then the next 2. Whatever number or two numbers you used in your median, you don't touch. So now I got rid of 0 and 2, and then I have 1 and 2 left. When I average that out together, I know that my first quartile is going to be 1 and 5/10 to be my first quartile. So to find my third quartile, now I'm going to do the numbers to the right of my median. And again, I don't use a 4 because that was part of my median. So I'm going to cross out 5 and 8. I have 6 and 7 left, which means I'm going to find the average of those. And my third quartile is 6 and 5/10. So now I know my percentiles, okay? And now I want to find out, okay, what's the range? What's the range from my 25th percentile all the way to my 75th percentile, that middle 50%. So when I subtract those, my interquartile range is going to be 5, all right? So the range of your whole data was 8, your interquartile range was 5. So let's do a U-try problem, and I made this one extra special for you. I gave lots of numbers. So it says a class of 7th grade students were collecting data for a project. They decided to survey 20 other students to see how many apps they had on their phone. The data is shown in the table below. So one student had 11, one student had 21, one student had 8. so forth and so on. You are going to find the mean, the median, the mode, the range, the first quartile, the second quartile, the interquartile range, and then any outliers that you have. Now, when you're doing this, please use a calculator to help you do the math. Again, we're not trying to work on your arithmetic. We're trying to work on some higher level thinking. So make it easy on yourself by using a calculator when you're finding the mean and the median and the mode. When you're ready, go ahead and push pause. Show your work on your notes. If you need extra room, get another piece of paper. Push play when you're ready, and we can check your understanding. So the first thing I want to do is I want to list these from least to greatest. Okay, so I have 0. That's my first one. And now, I didn't need to do that to find my mean, but it's just easy because I need to do it for the rest of them. I need to find my mean by finding the average of all the apps people had on their phone. So the total, when I add them up, was 364, and now I want to divide that by 20. And that's going to give me an average of 18 and 2/10. So the mean is 18 and 2/10. The average amount of apps people had was a little over 18. So now if I want to find, I'm going to do my mode first before I start crossing things out. I see that I had 2 10s and 2 11s and 2 14s. And then everything else is just 1. So I actually have 3 different modes here. I have 10, 11, and 14. So you could call this maybe a trimodal. There we go. I don't even know if that's a word, but we just made it up. Sounds good. And now to help me find my interquartile range, I need to find my median. So I'm going to cross these out one at a time. Here we go. A lot of crossing out going on because I'm trying to find that center number. Here we go. Keep going. 12, 23, 14, 21, 14, 19. I'm left with 2 numbers, so I need to find the average of those, which would be 15.5. So my median is 15.5. I'm going to circle both of these, okay, and that's going to be your second quartile. Your second quartile is 15.5. Your first quartile, we need to take the rest of the numbers now and find the median of the rest of the numbers. So now I have 0, 14, 8, 14, 10, 12, 10, 11. And I have 11 right here, so my first quartile is going to be 11. You can label that as a Q1. I forgot the range. I know my maximum number is 34, and my minimum is 0, so your range is going to be 34. So now we need to find the third quartile. So I'm going to take the numbers to the right of my second quartile, okay, and the 2 numbers I used for it. I'm going to cross them out one number at a time. There we go, and I'm going to be left with 28. So 28 is going to be my third quartile, so we're going to label that with a Q3. Come down here, my third quartile is 28, so the interquartile range, the difference between my 75th percentile and my 25th percentile is 28 minus 11, which is going to be 17. And then when I'm looking for outliers, I really don't see too many because they're kind of evenly grouped. 0 is still pretty close to 8, so I'm going to say really that there aren't any outliers here. So I'm going to say NA for not applicable. And again, that's how you find the interquartile range. So now you can take a group of data, you can find all the different ways you can measure it, and now you can start working on making conclusions about that data. Most people had around 15 based on your median, right? Thank you so much for checking us out. We really appreciate you spending your time with us. If you have not done so already, we would love for you to like the video, comment, let us know where you're watching from, and subscribe. Hit that red button. We would love for you to do that. Join our InstructaBeats family. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We really appreciate it. InstructaBeats out.